All right, guys, we're on.
Yeah,
Wait, I
that was
turn
the
that
second.
on.
What? Oh, Taco Man.
But that's recorded.
That's recording, yes.
No more secrets.
Yep, exactly. Now I can unmute this, start this.
Okay, we ready to go?
We're ready.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order at 6:03 p.m. Could I have a roll call and establishment of a quorum, please?
Mike Wagner.
Here.
Cindy Byteen. Gary Demashki. James Hartman.
Here.
Mary Beth Shaw. Here. Matt Crow.
Here.
All right, I have proof of posting. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think Cindy just joined us. Cindy, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you, thank you. Sorry about that.
It's all right.
Weird working from home and you just totally lose track of time.
We're glad to have you.
Thanks, guys, sorry about that.
All right, so we're on to 1.5, approval of the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All right, is there any questions or changes? All right, hearing none. Mike?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
Cindy?
Yes,
Mary Beth?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Okay, we're down to 2.1, approval of the Board of Education meeting minutes from April 27th of 2020.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Mary Beth, and then Mike had the second.
Okay, any questions about that? Okay, hearing none. Mike?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
Cindy?
yes,
Mary Beth?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. We are on to 2.2, approval of the Board of Education workshop minutes from May 4th of 2020.
So moved. Second.
Mike and Matt. Hey, Gary, just real quick, I thought I saw you pop in. Can you hear us? You did.
You're not joined until you participate.
Gary?
Let's see, yeah.
Okay.
Muted, isn't
Yeah, he is.
He can
Well,
mute himself.
we have a first and a second. Is there any questions about the workshop minutes? All right, hearing none. Mike?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
Cindy?
yes,
Mary Beth?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. We're on to 2.3, approval of the payroll accruals disbursement.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there any questions or comments about the payrolls as listed? Okay, hearing none. Mike?
Yes.
Barb?
Yes.
Cindy?
yes,
Mary Beth?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
And I vote yes as well. Public input? Don't have any that are known.
Receive anything?
Okay.
Gary, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I had a mess of a time logging in here. The internet must be crazy busy tonight or something.
Well, that's okay. We got through just the first very part of the agenda. We're down to 4.1, board president right now.
Sounds good.
As far as I'm concerned, I just wanted to say thank you for getting the senior signs out there. And if you guys saw or were able to see, we were on the news about the senior signs, so that was great publicity for us. The teachers and staff also put out a video, a Misty video to the students, which I thought was nice. And we're just kind of trucking along as best that we can. And graduation got moved to May 7th as of right now. And
August.
or,
I
I'm
was
sorry.
like,
August 7th.
It's done.
Yeah.
We're not exactly sure what that's gonna look like yet, but we'll just kind of play it by ear and see when that time gets a little closer, so. That's all I got. So we're on to-
Liz, I knew you were made for the camera.
Liz, you were getting props on how great you did on your on-camera interview.
thank you very much.
All right, so then we're on to 4.2, which is administrator and admin reports.
Yeah, so we've been doing this for a while now, so I can probably stop explaining what we're doing, but
I don't know if any of the board members have questions or clarifying comments for any of the administrators regarding the reports they provided.
So I just had a question on the formative skills thing in Scott's report. So is there a way that we're gonna make sure we get them all back? Because as I noticed with some of the online stuff, some kids that we hope would participate are not participating, so will we get will we follow up if we don't hear from them?
Scott,
Yep,
did you hear it all right?
I heard everything.
Lovely.
Yeah, no, Mary Beth, that's a great question. And in fact, I thought about that today as well while I was working on them. Since they are going to be sent out to kiddos emails, we'll be able, as they come in, kind of track who's done it and who has not. And then, yeah, it will be a follow-up, probably email to parents or a call to parents and just say, hey, something came through your kiddo's email. If you could just make sure they do it quick and get it back to us. And then part of that will be then reporting back to parents about kind of the results and, skills their kids missed and maybe things to keep working on and things like that. Is kind of the goal of that at this point, to kind of not only get ready for next year, but also to kind of finish this year, getting towards next year as well.
Yeah, that sounds great, thanks.
I have a question on Andy's. How would this summer sports work if they still do it? Because in his, it says there still could be a 30-day or a summer league, I guess. I'm not sure how that would work.
You're the only one asking that question. Honestly, we would have to probably be in phase 3 if we're going to hold any sort of competition. We still would have to adhere to social distancing guidelines no matter which phase we're in. So, something like softball or baseball, technically you couldn't do with like the umpire where they stand in relation to the catcher. So there's a million of those types of scenarios that you could go over and lots of questions about it. So yeah, we don't really know. And then, scheduling is going to be another unknown. Who is participating, who is willing to schedule, what is that competition going to look like? And as with a lot of things in this situation, we won't know exactly for, an undetermined amount of time, so that makes everything even trickier. So, lots of different scenarios to plan for, but and we will plan for them, it's just, we don't know exactly what we're planning for or when. Realistically, does it seem like it would happen? Everything I've heard is probably not. And a lot of schools are, voluntarily not participating in this. So yeah, I don't know if that answers anything.
It's going to be a tough uphill battle.
I could probably talk for another 2 hours on this. I'm happy to answer whatever questions you might have.
I'm just kind of curious if there's been guidance as far as like the rec leagues, or, it's easy for a school to follow mandates, but when it's, the youth and the rec leagues, or, even club sports, or, what's separating the rules and the mandates from the school organization from all the other groups?
That's a great question. I don't know if you saw in the news, the Appleton Police Department broke up a baseball practice. That was like a youth team practicing on a field. And so, to me, and Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, to me the only difference is that in our case, we have this very clear line in the sand with the end of June and having our facilities be off limits. Beyond that, the same rules apply with the Safer at Home and the Badger Bounce Back Plan in terms of group size, in terms of social distancing. So in reality, for club organizations, whatever, youth leagues, rec leagues, they have no different set of rules than we do, like I said, with the exception of that June 30th deadline. Is that your interpretation as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, like, we would have to be at least in phase 2 if you're gonna allow group gatherings of more than 10. So, you know, if you're tracking the Badger bounce back plan, like, that would be the bare minimum for any type of gathering like that if you're gonna get, you know, anything above 10. So, that seems to be a ways off, but even then, there's restrictions as to who can play and, you know, there's, you know, where you can travel and who can come visit you, and so competitions would be much different, but, you know, like, the American Legion baseball, they canceled, yesterday, I believe, a number of, you know, youth leagues have been canceling, so, yeah, they would follow the same guidelines as everybody else.
I think like the hardest part too, as a parent too, is even if you're adhering to some of those rules, it's still the notion that, you know, are people carpooling to the practices, my kids wiping their snotty fingers on the ball and then throwing it to the, you know, so it seems almost irresponsible, even as a parent, to even throw my kid into that when, if there are any restrictions and we're even trying to limit some of this stuff, what is the point, you know, to even dabble at it if it's not an all-go?
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that's why a lot of schools are choosing not to participate in this regardless. You know, I think everybody's still processing this. It was such a weird solution, and I get why they did it. They did it so that they could give these seniors one last chance. And for those of us who have participated in high school athletics, you know how important it is. So I get that part, but we do have to decide, you know, even if we can do this, is this something that we want to do? You know, and that's not necessarily something that has to be answered right now, but as we get closer to that July date, you know, we can say right now, yes, we have an open mind to this, but does that mean we're going to do it? You know, that, to me, we have to see where we're at in terms of COVID and how safe we think it is for our kids. If it is worth it to, yes, just get a practice together or whatever. So, yeah, definitely something to keep in the back of our minds.
Totally, I agree. I hate when there's awkward silence after you say something. Everybody's like sitting around.
Well, I get it. And as long as I'm talking and not interrupting anything, Barb, can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, yeah. Sure, normally I don't have that problem. Okay, you got it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have any other questions about any of the other admin reports?
We had kind of talked about maybe doing something in terms of graduation, the weekend that they're supposed to do it, the day, something virtual, a send-off, a video. Has that been talked about doing any type of?
Honestly, I wouldn't say in much detail.
What are your thoughts?
With the fluidity of everything else, just trying to like survive one day to the next is
Yeah.
part of the problem, let alone looking forward to the actual date. The one thing that we did mention when we had put the signs out was that those were going to be distributed to kids after their last day of school. So in my mind, that'll be our opportunity when those are distributed to our senior students, is to try to find a way to make that kind of a special experience and something that's noteworthy.
Do you think we could utilize a couple of the buses just for visual effects?
Yep.
Maybe like, you know, put some of those banners that they chat on there.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Something like that can definitely be
Yeah.
a part of that. And like I said, full transparency,
No, I get it.
we're just building this
Yeah.
plane right now as we fly it, so that's one of those things that's on the radar. And in my mind, as we looked at that, it was like, all right, we said we were gonna keep them up through the 22nd, their last day of school, then that following week, when we said we were gonna distribute them, that's our opportunity to kind of make that a big deal
Yeah.
and recognize those kids, but that hasn't taken much more shape other than those random thoughts that I've had.
I get it.
Any other questions? I guess the one thing I do want to add, and what we just talked about was a nice segue, and I'll try to keep this brief, and I talked about this at our district leadership team today, and I'll give you guys the same lead-in that I gave DLT. I'm not trying to be dark or rain on anyone's parade or be negative, because that's not who I am at all. But on Friday, I mentioned earlier, we had a statewide conference call. At one point, there was over 500 individuals on this conference call, including superintendents, Department of Health Services, DPI, a lot of people. And DHS, Department of Health Services, did a lot of the talking. And I just want to share a few of the things they shared, just because whether we like this or not, unfortunately, this is our reality right now. And I think for us to kind of wrap our heads around the enormity of the situation, because I can tell you that it's been personally sobering to start to wrap my head around the enormity of this the last few days. And Friday really put it in a pretty stark perspective for me. So the first comment that she made, and then made repeatedly, and this is from the DHS, is we are running on COVID time, meaning all of these events and things that we would like to think we're going to have at some point, we just don't know. And for us to like even plan them, we need to keep planning, but we just don't know. And I mean, her comment was, it does not look promising for things this summer, and even the fall looks like there are going to be some major restrictions. Perhaps during summer school, if we can even do anything in the building during summer school, that's the time to test some strategies with social distancing, with PPE, with ways of organizing kids and teachers. Their guidance team is working on getting something out this week with some more definitive parameters for summer school. They recently put out parameters for graduation, which I would say all but saying you can't have an in-person graduation ceremony basically said you can't have a graduation ceremony. I kind of liken it to the WIA's guidance. They didn't say you can't do it, but when you look at the order, it looks pretty impossible to everyone that's logical. The other piece for our employees is they don't have yet, at some point they're going to have to, but they have no clear guidance on what we can do with staff members or individuals who are 60 plus when it comes to bringing them back into the building, being in a vulnerable subgroup. What does that look like for them for returning to work? So that was kind of the health department. Then the State Education Association, WASDA, John Forrester, our lobbyist who's in the Capitol frequently. I had mentioned previously that they were talking about an approximately $2 billion budget shortfall for 2021. They're now estimating that to be closer to $3 billion for 2021. Public schools are the biggest user of state revenues. So the estimates that they have right now is that roughly 1/3 of that budget loss will come from state funding for schools. $1 billion. So I guess really for us, we do need to remain positive and focus on what we can control, but at the same time, as we just continue to see and hear, and the more of these meetings I participate in, the reality, I think, is becoming more and more evident to me that even on September 1st, if you ask me to predict what exactly this is going to look like, I'm going to be talking in hypotheticals and imagining scenarios that none of us have ever imagined before. So, like I said, I don't say that to rain or to be dark, but at the same time, I think for me the optimism is still there. The reality is, wow, it's hard to even imagine. So I don't know if anybody has anything to follow up on that, or if any of the other administrators want to comment, but I just feel like it's important for all of us to kind of wrap our head around that, because I don't even want to predict what this ride's going to look like the next couple months, other than it's going to be a new ride that none of us have ever been on before. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or comments, but.
After reading Matt's plan, has there been any type of like foreshadowing of like utilizing the 3 sites differently? because of the space? I mean, if you had to, and if the teacher ratio is something funky or per classroom or something of spreading out and utilizing the spaces of the three buildings differently as an option?
No, but.
It just kind of clicked, I'm like, well, I guess we do, in terms of spacing,
Mhm.
you know, if again, it's all unknown, but if it was, you know, only so many kids per classroom, certainly this, you know, is a space that could become something that,
Or other spaces within the community, there's other large
Sure.
gathering areas.
how that kind of works.
Yeah, so I can't remember who it was, but someone today made a comment about something, and I said, well, at this point, every idea is open
Anything
for
and
consideration,
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
yeah, those are the types of creative solutions that very much will be on the table, and the thought that the 22, kindergartners, first graders are gonna trot into their room on September 1, and this is gonna look like it has for the last 25 years on September 1, unless something completely changes course, I don't know that that's realistic to think right now. So what it looks like, we will have to do a lot of planning this summer and prepare for.
And, you know, I do think we joked and we said what we did about the utilization of our technology and all that, however that looks, but, even as we were just kind of talking, if, you know, they do all of a sudden put in these rules about quarantining your children every time they show symptoms, then I think this utilization of the online classrooms like we're doing now could just be the norm too, is to say, hey, sorry, my kid's got a fever and now I have to keep them home 2 weeks. Well, we don't have to stop like we would have done, you know, previously. And so I hope that as resistant as, you know, some were previously, that this has maybe opened the door of a new norm that will benefit everybody. And that even if my kid's out for a week or two, then if we utilize, you know, some of these online capabilities, that when they come back, it's easier for the kid, it's easier for the teacher, and, you know, that might be the world that we are living to, is to say, you know, as a parent, my practitioner is now telling me I have to keep my kid out of school 2 weeks. You know, it might be the new norm, even if it is back to normal, you know.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think part of the other piece that I think we could admit public schools have been slow to change in many cases, with, yes, things like online learning, is we very well may have some families that even if the state tells us things are back to normal, they say, you know what, I don't want to send my kid to school. I kind of like Wisconsin Heights though, what are you going to do for us? And at that point, you know, something previously that we probably wouldn't have considered at a very deep level, I do believe now as we talk about, I don't know, normal's not even the right word, just a different world, an evolved educational experience. That very well could be part of this evolved educational experience where there may be families that do elect to do that, and how are we going to respond to that? Are we going to be agile enough to respond?
Could you almost offer like where they could do like the online or in class where they're able to Zoom per se into the classroom and really still participate fully just through the computer instead. So they have that choice almost, because I know there are going to be parents that are going to say, hey, I'm not ready to send my kids yet. But then they can still, you know, because it's definitely a clear divide of people that say this isn't as big a deal, and some people are, so it's definitely a divide. So they're definitely going to be way quicker to send their kids than others.
Like I said, honestly, Mike, the best thing that I can say is every option right now is worth considering, and flexibility is going to be the name of the game. And with the technology piece, had it later in the curriculum one, but I mean, yeah, the notion of adopting a learning management system, we had it on our to-do list for 2021. That went from a 12-month adoption to a 2-month adoption, and we'll have a decision by this week, because the reality is we don't want to start September 1st the way we had to start abruptly on March 16th.
And is that type of system, I can wait if you're gonna talk about that later.
We'll just
I
not
don't
have
know,
to
it's
talk
silly.
about it
Okay.
later.
if that, is that a system where, like, the space is maximized, like the hard drive space or something, or is it?
It's
Like
cloud-based.
conceptually, okay, so in theory, if there was, like an in-classroom video of that day, and then it was posted, and even if it was only available 10 days or something, and taken off, that space wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, no,
you know,
it's
capacity.
not mine, it's a cloud-based program.
Okay.
Kind of the, I don't wanna, once again, as I said at district leadership team today, I don't wanna oversell that this is like gonna solve all of our problems, but at the same time, I think the best way to describe it in like simple terms is it becomes a lot more of a one-stop shop. So rather than having Dojo for messages and pictures and things like that, and then having maybe some teachers using Google Classroom and others using a different platform, now this is kind of the one spot you go, and it pulls everything together. So that's the only spot that you have to go. Now, you still may end up clicking on things or finding things in their Schoolology page, for example, that might take you somewhere else, but this is where you go to find it. And yes, it integrates with Zoom, it integrates with Skyward, so you can post assignments in there. It can go right back into the Skyward gradebook and vice versa. They talk to each other. If someone does a Zoom or records a Zoom, I mean, that's another thing that I've talked about with the admin some. Like, I don't want to say this will absolutely happen, but I can see a future where we just turn Zoom on all the time in the classroom.
Right.
And now, yes, if you're not there for whatever reason, you can watch it live.
Supported.
And if you can't, well, then it's recorded, and now anybody can watch it. So, I mean, yeah, I think a lot of these things, probably for better, are becoming much more realistic just because of the situation.
Which I think is cool, because I think one of the main priorities all along has just been consistency. And so that from year to year, your child moves from here to here to teacher, it's always predictable. It's always in one spot. The kids get used to it, the parents get used to it, and I think it would make everybody's lives easier, you know, than 5 different passwords for different, you know. But that's exciting.
Yeah, no, so I mean, I anticipate we'll have some decisions made there, and I mean, our goal right now is to try to do some training even this spring before school's over, so our staff can kind of get their feet wet before summer.
Has that been part of the staff discussion? Or do
With,
they know, you
with
know,
district
I mean,
leadership
yeah.
team, and yeah, and we've
How-
brought it up, I mean,
How's
it's,
the feedback been? Yeah.
well, so the groups that vetted the program admittedly are probably what I'd call early adopters, so their comfort and their willingness to dive in is maybe not the norm. But in general, people get it. I mean, of course, there's some fear of change and, oh no, this is something new. But I mean, no, the group that vetted the programs very much on board, and I think as a whole, people do get it. It's just kind of like, oh,
Crap.
yeah.
Well, and I think the other nice thing, well, I don't want to say the nice thing, but this has lasted long enough that there really are no holdouts at this point.
Right.
I mean, all the teachers have had to have some sort of buy-in and have had to learn how this whole thing
Necessity.
works. And so that could pay dividends later on too.
Yeah.
So.
You're gonna try to keep one platform per se, 'cause I think right now some teachers use one kind, unless I'm wrong, I could be hearing it from my kids. It seems like one uses, you know, Zoom, one uses something different, and they have to kind of bounce back and forth between teachers using different programs or different systems, I guess.
Well, I think the goal is always consistency as much as possible. Like I said, what I believe to be the major advantage of a learning management system is that's where you just go to get everything. I'm not going to sit here and promise you on May 11th that we find ourselves on September 1st that everyone's going to use Zoom or everyone's going to use, you know, Google Hangout, because I don't know. I'm not going to say that I don't know. But what I can tell you is that our goal is always as much consistency as possible. The struggle is previous experience, it's training, it's comfort, it's familiarity, it's getting people up to speed. But yeah, I mean, as much as we possibly can, we will do that. And And the best part is, you go into your Schoology, you now have your 6 classes, it's organized, you know what's due today, your parents know what's due today. The platform is very user-friendly. It almost looks like a Facebook-like interface, like a page. So in terms of navigation and things, it's one of those where if like, you're just not totally scared of technology, I think you can log on and just kind of figure it out.
And so then like second hour, it would be, oh, great, English, and maybe it's Zoom, maybe it's something, but if you click on the hyperlink, it's gonna take you to whatever it
Yeah,
is.
it's gonna
rather
take you
than
to whatever-
That would
figuring
take you
out
right to that,
what-
okay.
Right.
Your whole schedule is integrated right
Into that,
So
so
it's
first,
just figure out
First
what-
hour is science, second hour is
so you
English,
just go
third
into
hour
that
is...
class and
Right.
then it
Just go right
automatically takes
through.
you to,
Exactly,
okay, that's,
yeah.
okay, that makes more
The
sense.
teacher then obviously
Yeah.
would have the input,
To
but
figure out
then
where
it
their
would be figured,
comfort
right.
is
for
and
the-
level is at. Okay.
The other thing that, in a nerdy way, excited us administratively is, I mean, it does have the capability to then tie your assessments back to standards, and then we'll actually give a push out or show like a display to both students, staff, parents on the standards and how you performed like on this standard, that standard, where you need to work on things based on standards. So I mean, there are certainly some advantages as well where this has some huge potential, but for the time being, the goal is consistency and just getting people to feel comfortable with this quick timeline.
So like I was part of a meeting where they were talking about what could some potential long-term effects be from this whole experience, and one administrator said, well, potentially maybe snow days would go away, because if there's a snow day, our teachers will just push the instruction out, through the sites, and we can count that day. Well, maybe that's an option, maybe not, but that's just one thing that I hadn't thought about that could potentially be a fix for the future.
It's a good glass half full idea.
Yeah.
And I agree, there's some validity to that.
It's the excuse we always use at work. If you let me work remotely, I would never take a sick day.
Okay, does anybody have any other comments or questions about their board or admin reports? Otherwise, Jordan's
No, I'm good, I just wanted to share a few of those notes, and that led into multiple other conversations, so we're good.
All right, well then we can move on to district business committee discussion and information. So under 5.1, everybody should have got their committee appointments sent to them today. I did it once and then I didn't change the heading where it was 2020, 2021, so then I sent it out again in a different format. But all of the committees were the same or consistent on both of them. So if you guys don't have any questions about them, I tried to put you where you requested, and if we stay with the committees as a whole, they're somewhat irrelevant in any way, but.
Is everyone good with this?
Good job, James.
Okay, perfect, and I'll make sure that I have a saved copy and Beth does, and we should all have it then.
So then, moving on to 5.2, one of our focus points is budget and finance, and that would be Cindy.
At this point, there's lots going on, so I will leave it right up to Jordan and Cheryl. Take it away.
Yeah, I guess for the board's sake, hope you had a chance to reference the documents that we attached for you to view, and then kind of the accompanied comments. So, without getting too deep into the financial woods, the two models that Cheryl had put together for you, one of them showed that if we had surplus funds from the end of this year, putting that money into the fund balance, and then the other one showed putting that money into Fund 46, which is our long-term capital projects fund that we started a couple of years ago. So really, if you looked at the outputs on those documents, you would have noticed that the primary impact or difference is there's a slight difference in the mill rate. As it projects out, it's between 5 and 10 cents different in terms of how that mill rate is projecting out for the future. And that is simply a function of the state funding formula. As we've talked about before, for us, putting money into fund balance actually increases our state aid, which then decreases local property tax contributions slightly. So I guess with that background in mind, I don't know if anyone has any questions. The good news budget-wise right now for the summary is even at least a week ago, what we believe to be kind of worst-case scenario where revenues were completely frozen, and then an additional $50 per pupil decrease in funding. We still project out and believe that we could have a balanced budget for next year. If that amount per pupil continues to escalate as the state tries to fix the budget, well then, yeah, those conversations will get harder and we'll have to talk about things. But the other summary I think right now that's important is we have a very healthy fund balance. The state has taken, state government has taken a little more keen interest in fund balance lately as they talk about ways to solve the budget woes. So for us, I don't know that increasing fund balance as a function of our budget is probably a good strategy, because my belief would be is the larger that gets, the more attention it'll garner at the state level. And we have a very healthy balance right now, which allows us the last 2 years to avoid short-term borrowing. So I don't think that number needs to grow. Fund 46 could definitely help us in the future with our projects if we talk about them. And those dollars would be available to us starting in 2022. So we're only a couple of years away from actually being able to use that Fund 46 account as well. So that's kind of the 30,000-foot summary. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions, or Cheryl, if I missed something, feel free to chime in.
And that amount that's left in the Fund 46 at that time can all be used, like it's not segmented out per dollar amount or anything, right? It's just whatever's in there you can start.
Yep, yeah, so the question was, when we hit that sunset period on Fund 46, can we use the entire amount? And the answer is yes. So when you start that account, you just have to start it with something. And once you start it, you basically start the clock on the 5-year timeline. And then whether you put that money in the first year or the 4th year, it's available to use. So whatever funds that we have in Fund 46 as of 2022 would be available for projects or things like that. And if you remember, we've had to approve that 10-year maintenance plan ever since then. I keep making updates as we do projects. We'll do that again this July. I just worked on it the other day. And that is then kind of your list of things that you could dedicate those dollars to, which for us is pretty wide encompassing. We'll find a way to use the money.
Did you put the solar light on that?
As of now, it is not on there. That's certainly an idea, though. Something, yeah.
In terms of returns too, of investment?
She asked if the solar project would be something that we could put on there. I believe it would. Cheryl, would you agree, or don't you know?
I think pretty much any project that we want to do can be put on the 10-year plan. And your summary was pretty good, so unless anybody has any specific questions.
Well, I just wanted to say, Cheryl, I know this is a bit of a crazy time right now, so I just appreciate all your work with keeping the numbers straight and keeping us informed.
Thank you.
And being a mom.
The solar idea is a great one, because, yeah, basically on that list, you're not compelling yourself to do any of it, but you can put things on there just as ideas, and then yes, if we found ourselves in that place in 2022, then we could actually use it for that. So yeah, right now there's a lot of roofing projects on there, there's a lot of classroom remodels on there, there's a lot of parking lot resurfacing, all other things that we know we're going to have to do, but that's another good idea, so I'll add that.
All right, does anybody have anything else for budget and finance? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to curriculum 5.3. Matt is the chair, so I don't know if you have anything that you wanted to say, or if you just want to hand it over to Dale. And
I don't specifically. Other than.
You don't need to.
No, but I probably should get an idea of what most people usually do. Yeah.
it's fine.
not, like, previously, we would actually have subcommittee meetings, so then the chair obviously was more involved in the agenda and items and communicating, and, but in this kind of setting, the chair is a little bit less irrelevant than it used to be.
Yeah, so since Dale is our curriculum guy, you and two other board members would meet specifically with him and kind of discuss things.
Small group.
In this case, you can kind of defer to him since he's the curriculum guy for us. And then, you know, he's talking to the admin team in Jordan and kind of keeping them filled in, so.
Okay. I guess relative to the curriculum items, attached a few documents relative to summer school. We have an additional discussion on that with admin tomorrow, and then an additional planning meeting via Zoom on Thursday with Josie Geischer, our summer school principal. We are tirelessly working to try to put something together for July. More than likely, what's going to be feasible is if we can bring some kids into the building, we will bring some very small groups of students in for some targeted instruction. And then other students, we do want to provide opportunities, and I know no one is excited. Well, I shouldn't say no one. Probably not a lot of people are excited about the thought of online right now. Maybe with a month break in between and then some fun enrichment type classes, maybe that'll become a little more exciting for kids, but the reality is it does not appear that much else is even going to be something that we can do based on the guidelines and restrictions in terms of numbers. So just to kind of keep you in the loop on what that planning's looked like, we attached some documents. Anyone have any specific questions, I guess, to summer school right now before I just kind of keep us moving here? I can tell I'm going to lose my voice before the night's over and we barely started.
A lot of unknowns.
Yeah, let's just
Hard to
keep our
ask.
fingers
Yeah.
crossed that we can do something,
Yeah, they're
because
doing
we have a certain group of students that will greatly benefit from being able to put something together.
So it also requires a lot of flexibility on the part of the staff, because of course they were gonna start at a different date, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll have availability of that.
Yep, and that's one thing we have done, and I'll say I think we've done actually quite well. We've done a lot of surveying of our staff to get their feedback and to see what is feasible for them and what's not feasible. Because certainly we understand that without their support and their buy-in, we can talk all we want, it's not gonna happen. So we have done some significant surveying and gotten feedback from staff members, so we will continue to work on it. We said, kind of put the stake in the ground at May 22nd, that we'd get something back out to parents to let them know what we're planning at that point, so that gives us not quite 2 weeks to kind of finalize and see what we think is feasible. I am looking forward to the health department guidelines or health services guidelines this week, so that'll help us finalize that. Draft calendars, we had approved a calendar previously for 2021 when we did it 2 years ago. After we looked at it for like the 400th time, we noticed there was actually an editorial mistake on it. So we knew that we needed to update 2021 anyways. And then just in lieu of some of our summer school discussions, we had talked about the possibility of an August jumpstart. So we just have that draft kind of circulating for 2021 as well. And then we did put together a 21-22 draft. We were engaged and we're really enjoying the calendar work, so we figured we might as well start 21-22 right away. So if you want to review these, or if you already have, if you have feedback or questions, but the plan for this would be is to bring back whatever it is that we think will be the calendar for 2021, and then the 21-22 calendar to bring those back for our next meeting in May for approval. I don't know if anyone has questions on calendar, or if any of the other administrators have anything they want to put in there about calendars.
Has there been any discussion about starting for Labor Day? I know we kind of threw it out there at some point, but. Sorry, my question, for those that couldn't hear me, is about the possibility of ever starting before Labor Day.
Yeah, so, I mean, that has come up some on the statewide conference calls. I don't see that garnering statewide support, at least now. They did say if we wanted to file an individual district waiver and try to start school before September 1st, we could.
And that's what some schools did last year, right? I
Well,
remember.
schools have done that in the past if they had construction projects.
Oh, okay.
They've done that. Our kind of workaround to that was we had talked about running a jump start in August, which would actually be run through summer school, but basically what it would be is kind of starting school early. Admittedly, the last week, as I've heard more and more from the state, and then gotten more and more feedback from our staff with some of our surveying, I don't know that an August, early to mid-August start, number one, I don't know that we're going to be able to do anything anyways, and number two, I don't know that we have a ton of buy-in from our staff.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It's unfortunate. I think everybody's holding up for the month of August to possibly do something, and
Realize
not
part of
fair
summer.
to, to make them feel obligated to.
So we'll have those decisions by the end of this week, but very cautious at this point because, like I said, I'm not convinced that we're even going to be allowed to do it from the regulations, and then even if we were, I don't know that we would do ourselves a lot of favors with our staff if we did it. And then last one, learning management. I think we talked about this one quite a bit already. If anyone else has any other questions, but yes, LMS, another acronym in the world of education. But this, really our conversation has now started to center on Schoolology after we vetted the programs. Good news is it's about half the cost as Canvas, so we like the features just as much and it's more affordable, so that was a win-win. Rare win-win. So I don't know if anyone else has any questions on that.
I think it's awesome. I would love to see something sometime if,
Yeah.
you know, somebody wants to poke around and show us kind of
Yep.
what it looks like, and it's very simple, you know, nothing
I can do that.
crazy.
All right, anything else? So employee relations is not our focus point, but I guess just, that's Mary Beth, did you have anything that you wanted to know? All right, facilities and transportation, that's Mike, it's not a focal point, but did you have anything?
Just appreciated everybody's input last week.
Okay. Insurance, that's Gary. Gary, did you have anything for insurance?
No, I think we covered that last meeting.
Okay, so then we're on to policy. That's me for the chair, and I know Jordan had some updates that he wanted to talk about.
Yeah, well, I know that policy is everyone on the school board's favorite thing to look at and analyze, so I could probably get a very detailed explanation of all the updates from you, but I won't put you on the spot like that. So, similar to what we've done in the past, working with Neola was one of the smartest decisions that we made in 2017 because the legal updates that we get and the expertise that we get through that partnership keep me feeling comfortable with what we have for our policies and knowing that they're vetted by an organization that does this for their living. So I met with Steve. Well, we had a Zoom meeting on April 30th. We went through the updates similar to the past, falling into those three categories. The attached PDF talks about kind of the revisions in very general terms. And then board members, you had access in board docs to look at those revisions if you made that choice. I guess two things that I just wanted to touch on real briefly because they're things that I know have come up in the last few years. Number 5330 was regarding medications. And specifically some of the language that's in there, and we did this in consultation with Katie Howe, our nurse, specifically referenced the use of CBD products on school grounds. Legally, this is a very gray area, and Katie was not in support of allowing that at school because it is such a gray area. So in case you get that question at some point, that is why. I have actually had this question the last few years from a few parents, And I just kind of wanted to put that one out there because as I see more and more CBD shops popping up on the side of the road, I'm assuming this will just become a more and more frequent topic that you hear about. And then the other one was 8390, and I'm going to get to it. $83.90 was the policy that we really enjoyed a couple of years ago, animals on district property. If you recall, we put up some of the signs around the district grounds, particularly the outdoor grounds, that reference this policy. And just in the evolving world that we live in, there's now, well, I shouldn't say now, there's an emerging category called emotional support animals. They don't have the same training as service animals do. So the new draft of policy 8390, it defines what an emotional support animal is, but then unlike a service animal, it does not compel us to allowing that on school grounds. Now, we may allow it on school grounds, but we do not have to allow that on school grounds. So I know that that's one that came up in the past, so I just wanted to point that out in case you get a question or you're curious what the update was.
Jordan, I actually had a question on that one. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis, so we kind of decide one, if someone comes to us and says, I want my snake at school, and we're like, heck no, and someone says, okay, I want my dog, then we can say yes. I mean, how do we put that into context?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that, I mean, there are certain circumstances, and I understand that if we don't take a black and white stance on it, that's going to potentially at some point make someone upset with us because we did say yes and we did say no to somebody. Legally, we're not obligated to do it. However, I can think of some circumstances, one that I'm aware of with a student, where I do believe as educators and as human beings, we would probably deem this to be a worthy request. In another situation, for student safety and a variety of other reasons, student comfort, something like you referenced with a snake, probably the answer would be no. And I guess for me personally, I'm willing, on behalf of the board and with the administration, to make those decisions and to justify those decisions based on what we believe is the best for all students, because I do see that there can be some difference there rather than just taking the stance that it's a black and white yes or no.
How often is there input from a therapist or child psychiatrist or, counselor, social worker on the legitimate need or the deemed legitimate need for stuff like this, or are we just kind of going off our own intuitions?
Yeah, Matt asked about if there would be, information from a therapist or from somebody else, and yes, to me those things would absolutely be considered as we were looking at these situations. Is there a documented need for this? What does that process look like, and things like that. So I certainly know that Mr. Matt Green, our Pupil Services Director, is very thorough and is very thoughtful and cautious in decision making. So he would be involved in any decision like this through Pupil Services and would be reviewing that type of paperwork or documentation.
Yeah, the thing I'd like to say is, because I think
Go Bucky!
you have to look at the students' programming and see where and when that that support animal might fit into that, because it might not necessarily be a all day, everyday thing, and that would be a compromise that we would reach. And the other thing too is that you weigh a lot of different factors, because you weigh the disruption to the educational environment as well. So it might not be necessarily specific of the animal, but really looking at the benefit for the student. And then, like Dr. Crow said, having that that medical professional or therapist written documentation, that helps get some support to, it's not just, yeah, this is my pet snake and it makes me feel good when it's wrapped around my neck.
When it gets pet then.
Any other questions or feedback on any of the policies? Those were just two that I wanted to kind of highlight so people were aware. Kind of as per our routine, the plan would be is to bring these back for approval at our next meeting, and then we would update our online policies accordingly.
Correct. So just the first reading, we'll bring it back again. We will move on to 5.8, public/government relations. This will be Barb.
We're hearing from Doreen.
Yeah, and I just sent her a text because I told her she probably didn't want to sit through an hour of other stuff waiting for us to get to this.
I guess I could just advise, after your email, to reach out to our state representatives on some of those topics. Otherwise, I guess always in the back of my mind is, I guess our utilization in this category, and I know Bev's still getting a little feedback from the social EDU.
Social School for EDU.
Yep. But at what point do we take it further, I guess, and I don't know, getting some help externally from somebody taking some of that stuff on? I mean, one idea, you know, like the signs or the parade that we're doing for the seniors. I mean, I'm always hesitant on some of that stuff because it seems like it falls on Jordan or the admin team, and at what point, you know, could a position or somebody else kind of take on some of those engagement responsibilities, or, because Bev certainly is in a position to do that all on her own, I wouldn't say, right, Jordan?
No, I mean, it's an aspect of what she does, but it's certainly not the only thing.
Right, right. And, you know, I don't know what kind of category that would fit in with the kids taking that on and some of the curriculum of some of the engagement pieces on social media or externally with the community, but to me, I think there's a lot of area to grow in that so that it doesn't always fall on Jordan or the admin or the teachers, and how we kind of coordinate all that, so.
Hello? Hi. We were just having a little bit of dialogue just in general about kind of communications and public relations at the district level, as I was waiting to get you in here. So we can pick that back up after we let you go. So if you just want to kind of jump in, Doreen, and kind of talk about where you're at and the things that you've kind of been doing behind the scenes since we saw you a week ago.
Alrighty, so thanks for inviting me back. I think what I'd like to really talk about tonight is sort of the processing that I went through after listening and having the dialogue with you the other night. And give you a little bit more about what I was thinking after. So I took a couple of days and I got back to Jordan with some thoughts. Couple of big ideas for you to think about, and then I think they formed a rationale as to why I'm proposing what I'm saying. So some of the big ideas that I'm thinking about are the community is not as tuned in as, you know, staff and parents, right? We know that. They're going to have, they become aware as the talk starts, but people have a lot on their minds right now. So we have to be very thoughtful about what it is that will start getting the word out in a very factual way. So that's one thing I was thinking about. People have a lot on their plate. We need to start filling in the details as they become known, and we need to sort of I'll say, shepherd that process. Make sure that's according to a plan. It's not just random or in any way inconsistent. I'm very thoughtful always about consistency of message. So that's a big idea that I had in the back of my mind after thinking about your situation. The other thing, and I really believe in this a lot, I believe that here you are going to be talking about public relations and district communication. Of course, that's what I do for a living for 30 years, right? And so I think a lot about having a content, I think a lot about what people care about, that's what we communicate about, right? It's not about what we care about, it's what the audience cares about. And so how would we integrate the facilities communication into your existing communication efforts? Making people want to know about the district as a whole. Your facilities issue is one piece of your pie. They have other things on their mind. I mean, during this time, they want to know if there's graduation. They want to know, there's lots of things people are thinking about. So how do we carefully integrate the information about facilities into your other communication strategies? And that's something Jordan and I will probably spend more time talking a lot about, is making sure that we're integrating your message into what you're already doing. And then the third thing I thought about is, and this is, those two pieces led me to this conclusion. And recently I finished working on a referendum in a central Wisconsin school district, and there was some similarities as I thought about it. And one of the things we did is we created these citizen updates. That doesn't mean that it's a print piece of paper that we hand out everywhere or we even send out, but we did create a hard copy as well as a digital copy. We called it Citizen Updates, and we really took our time to articulate the need, the problem, some of the questions that we were thinking about. Additionally, we spent some time articulating the district's assets, in other words, what's going right now. And after some amount of revision, not months and months, but careful work, we came up with a citizens update. And I can share that with Jordan, and I can share that with you. This is the tool that we used as sort of a pseudo fact sheet before they had a referendum question. But the important part of that was we got the information that you've been studying for months, boiled down into one sheet front and back. And what came out of that, and this is really important for a referendum campaign, is a consistent message that all of the board and the administrative team could easily speak to over time. Because it's really important that we boil it down to the key salient ideas, and that everybody, including you, all of you, have time to really think about that and make sure that it represents the Wisconsin Heights School District. So, in addition to that, so that's the concrete piece we're going to work on tonight that I want to show you that I started working on. It's not designed, and here's the thing. I always show you copy first because people love color and swirls and photos and things, and we get wrapped up in the visual, and we will spend time on it visually over time. But right now, I'm really focused on what the words say and what meaning they convey to the general public. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. And the other thing is I want to assure you that once we have the content ready, I do think you have work to do out in your community. Parents and staff are easy to contact. Parents and staff, we have their email addresses, we have their staff, they probably are, you have over 1,000 followers, maybe close to 2,000 followers. A lot of those could be parents and alumni, people who have a connection and staff. But what we really want to make sure is we hit our 75% as we talked about in the survey, those non-parent, non-residents who are going to be the majority of your voters. We have to talk strategically about how often we're going to reach them with your message and when and how. And there's a lot of work to be done to create that. I don't know Wisconsin Heights as well as you do. I need to spend more time with Jordan on that. But once we get this content fine-tuned, and I don't think we're there. Once we get this content fine-tuned, then we talk about how we're gonna distribute it. So that's like a two-part process, right? First you develop the content, and then once everything is consistent, how do we distribute it and to which audiences and when? That's when that timeline starts like rolling out. So that's how that process works. And tonight I asked Jordan if I could share that with you because I do this a lot, and I work in communications every day, all day. And I know that we're most successful when we all agree on what the content's going to be. And I know we're all successful when we can do that in an organized and strategic fashion. So I will, you know, once you get to know me, you'll find out I'm a hound for deadlines, I'm a hound for timelines, I'm a hound for getting things exactly right. And sometimes Jordan will send me something, and I'll say, nope, that is not what, and sometimes I'll say, perfect, let's go with that. I'm a hound on words and their meanings, and so hopefully as you get to know me, you'll get to appreciate that about me, I hope. Because I think it matters at the end of the day that we get it right. And I think you went through that with the survey process, by the way. Jordan, how many versions of the survey did you have before it went out?
20-something.
Yeah, I think that I went back to the survey as a result, was able to pull off key findings, key messaging from there, right? So I joined on when the survey was probably 3/4 of the way finished. And I even found a few things, right? But because you spent that time on it, it was a reliable document we can go back to now for some messaging. And that is why it was important to spend that much time on it, because it was really your first communication to the community about your project. So have I lost anybody, or are we still okay?
I think we're okay, we're just listening intently.
All right, well, I hope that I'm worth listening intently too. I really wish I had a haircut, I will say that, as I'm looking at myself here, and I'm like, can we please get haircuts soon? So what I'd like to do then, with Jordan's permission, is I see the agenda here, the FAQ document, which I'm calling a citizens update. Other FAQ topics for the upcoming weeks. I think Jordan sent me a list of questions from one of the administrators, and I think we need to, again, not go too far down the road. Let's make sure we get this first piece of information just right, and then we can take a look at the FAQs. And then the other thing you guys were talking about and I asked for was getting those community contacts so we could start figuring out how we're going to regularly communicate with some of your key influencers. Your timeline for communication has to match, will be different for different audiences. So item 4, so I wasn't able to stay on the whole conference you had on Friday, but I know that Performance Services and your leadership team had a meeting on Friday. We're probably going to have a meeting with more staff coming up. So we're going to take these things as we line them up. But I do not have I have a strategy, but I don't have a specific timeline because we need to think about when we're going to have that staff workshop. I need to know when you're going to be coming back to school, or if you're coming back to school, when some of that back to school information goes out, we're going to want to tag into that. So we have more research to do, and Jordan and I have more strategizing to do before we nail down the specific timeline for your communication. But this citizens update to me is going to be very important, so I'd like to transfer over to that now. So Jordan, you have it, you have to share your screen, right?
Yeah, and I think I can,
Or maybe everybody has it.
the board members do have it.
Of course, I was already tweaking it tonight as I waited.
Here, 1 second. There we go. 37,000 clicks, I can get there.
Okay, you don't mind.
No, that's fine, I just, I'll stop sharing my screen so as I navigate through my email and Drive, I don't do that on a Zoom meeting. Getting there. All right, can you see it? No, wrong screen. There it is.
I can see it.
Yep, we're good.
So, I have tried, and I ran this through a word checker, I mean, a pro writing aid to see what reading level it's at. It's still pretty high reading level. I probably want to take it down a little bit more. But I really tried to separate this into background information. Well, here's a couple of key driving things I need to say. I think we have to orientate people to the topic. I believe people expect boards of education to keep their buildings up. It's your responsibility, and I think people in the public believe that is true. So I started out by simply saying, you accept that responsibility, right? And always to audiences, we always want to tell them why are they getting this information, wherever it might be. The second thing is I went back to your survey and tried to paraphrase what I found in there as the problem. So why are you talking to me about facilities, in other words? I don't think it's and I just need to fill in what the middle and high school needs are, and it's pretty straightforward. Again, thinking about consistency, you did 20 plus drafts of the survey, it should be correct. But again, keeping in mind, most people aren't you. You live and breathe this information, they do not. The next section, Jordan, I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I spoke to Jordan about this, why is it important for you to continue moving ahead? I thought, let's be truthful to the public that you are moving forward, and why that's important. And so I propose these 3 statements. You can agree or disagree with them, but again, I think it's true. You want to use your efficiencies to make good future decisions, right? So if you can gain, if you continue to plan forward, you're going to have a better, as a board, you have a guidepost for making future decisions. And I tried to make it as simple as I could here. So this is a section that I'm going to, really need you guys to weigh in if I hit it right. I know some of you are questioning a few things, so I think I hit it after listening. I hope so. Sorry. Then what's been done? Jordan, you've done the facility study, you've done the enrollment study, and you've done the community survey. And those are really quick facts, but they show that this isn't coming out of the blue. And then why is the one campus district being considered? I think we need to talk about this section. As a board, these are things that I listened and thought I heard, but I would like you as a committee to talk about these and make sure that I have stated them correctly. Of course, these are just my words, not yours. I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So I want to work on this section with your permission, but I'll accept, of course, feedback on any of it. This was the area that I felt was very important. And we'll go to the bottom and come back to this, okay, Jordan?
Okay.
And then I just put this in tonight because I realized I wanted it in there. But then I realized I put it in at the end again. But I want to make sure that we kind of let people know in a very simple way what you're going to be doing. And then what is the difference between an operational referendum and a capital referendum? I mean, the question you asked last week, it may be a little long. It may not be exactly right. It is a little long. It is harder to explain to people who aren't spending most of their time working on these things. But I want everyone to know that, that we could easily, I can make it simpler, but if this is going to be on a website, there are rules for where you put more detailed information and where you put simpler information. And I think we'll probably store this on your website, so that is a place where people go for more detailed information. But we'll come back to that section. So what else can can we do? Can we go back to I see I put it in the timeline, I did that by accident, so we can just take that off the board. I wanted to get in the, yeah, we could go back to that.
Yep.
So I guess that's where I'd like to spend the majority of the time with your consideration, just reading that and then asking questions or giving me feedback. Or approving, like let's go forward and get it designed and let's see how it looks. We'll put it on the website, we'll create some sort of hard copy, and then what we'll do is propose how to get it out on social. In a couple different ways coming to mind.
Hi, Doreen, it's Cindy. I really like this. I think one of the ways to make it shorter would really be to begin that FAQ and, really focusing on just the details and then moving more of the explanation of information to that FAQ. I think we're on the right path. Just wanted to share that.
I appreciate that. Well, I did phrase these as questions at purpose, because I am trying to think about the audience that in every community isn't as clued in, right, as the people who work in the district or the board. So I did try to start with questions.
So Doreen, right now, I mean, to make this as clear as possible, what you're asking for from the board members right now is specifically this question, or this segment, excuse me, right here, and kind of the talking points under the headline of why is a one-campus district being considered. If they were to say, here are the most critical talking points that we have to this question, do they agree with this list? Do they have feedback on this list? Do they have additions, subtractions?
Yes.
Okay.
Anyone?
Well, I'm thinking about some feedback I got from a community member. So, we don't do it now, what's the worst case scenario? Why do we have to do this? Why do we even have to look at repairing or doing a new one? It's a lot of money. What's the worst thing that's gonna happen this year, next year, that we don't do something?
Well, I mean, Black Earth needs a new roof, for
Oh,
sure.
I know.
That's the one main thing. But
My initial reaction to this is maybe needing to take some time and reflect more on this a little bit and maybe collaborate as a group, as a whole. Because this is gonna be our first piece of communication following the survey and following some of that information. And to me, it just is a very stiff and formal first piece of communication that I think I am a little hesitant to throw at people and whether they would actually read it and whether it would actually stick. Because I think, as you pointed, I don't think we've appropriately communicated the need as to say, we are doing this because the Black Earth roof was falling apart and there were buckets under the roof when our children were in school. And plenty of our major pieces in the buildings are beyond their lifespan. And so we did the facility study because we needed to, because we are in a dire need of updates and putting some money into our schools, and we want to know how the community wants their money spent. So this really isn't we should look at our facilities. No, we have to put money somewhere, and we're looking for guidance because that's what we do. We're not the ones making the decision. We want guidance from our community. And I just don't think there's an emotional attachment to this yet because people really don't understand that the roof was leaking on our children and that these buildings are falling apart and there are some hindrances in the way we educate our kids. And so while I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of this, I think it's a very stiff and rigid first piece of communication that we really haven't yet been able to emotionally attach this facility need to the public in a very engaging way. Yeah.
And we've gotten along all these years, so can't
So
wait
I'm-
another year, can we have more time?
I'm thinking about, before we would release this, so I appreciate the feedback on voice, you know, stiff and rigid. What I'm wondering about is, could we get some photos of those dire, you know, because we talked about in our communication planning, one of the steps this month should be photography, and I've already started talking to a photographer. So it would be critical that you identify the areas that you want photographed that would show, you know, pictures of 1,000 words, right?
It's gonna rain.
So it would be critical that Jordan and I worked with his leadership team to develop a list of critical photos. That could help.
Well, and
Saying
Doreen,
that helps people understand, but using the right words as well.
I guess, and just for your reference, I mean, as I sit here and look through the facility booklet from the survey that Performance Service had done, I mean, it's each page, it's, you know, when they were doing their rating, it's pictures and an explanation of why it's
I
not.
don't have that study, so I will ask Judy for it.
Yeah, and so from my perspective, it's a very clear way of saying, hey, here's the picture of this, and this is why it's not good, and this is what could be better about it. And it's in very layman's terms, it's parking lot capacity. Look there's overflow in the parking lot. There's, you know, hinges falling off. The roof is leaking here. You know, it's not a very in-depth method, or it's not gonna, I don't think, cause a lot of work for anybody just to take a lot of the stuff that was in the facility study itself and to say, hey, here's some of the highlights, here for yourself, take a look. The pictures speak for themselves, you know, and I don't know if that means putting some sort of hyperlink on our virtual fact sheet of saying, hey, if you're interested in looking at the details, click here, and it'll take you to a slideshow of some of the pictures and explanations of why the school board looked into this facility study, and here were some of the results, and take a look for yourself, you know.
Any other questions or feedback, I guess, for right now, just specific to this point?
So, Doreen, is it my understanding that what this would look like, though, is the first part of it would be very short questions and answers, and that could be not really a softer approach, but that's more of a easy-to-read type of approach, and this more detailed, kind of more direct information these are things that are listed further down on the sheet for those people that want to really look into it in more detail and are not satisfied with the short answer that appears up above.
So here's where I'm at. I'm developing the foundational materials that we can then repurpose for different media, depending upon where it's going to appear. So initially, I think, you know, the website, people don't really go there, but it's a holder, right? It becomes a place where we can put the deep information and refer people to. So my suggestion to you tonight is to spend the appropriate amount of time developing the foundational material in layman's terms, the messaging that you want out there that we'll stick to, and how we present it. So direct answer, we might, let's say we talked last week briefly, we didn't even talk in depth about it, it was just mentioned, we're gonna have maybe send something to the community. If we did that, it might be the size of a postcard, and then you would direct them to your website. We talked last week about Facebook. We might do, there's all kinds of ways we can present information on Facebook to make it engaging, bits and pieces, sort of visual design that is consistent through all the posts. We haven't gotten that far. I mean, we started talking last week, and my my recommendation back to Jordan was we work on getting foundational information crafted that everybody will, I'll say for lack of a better term, I don't mean physically, sign off on, but you all know what's going out there. And then the job I take on to work with Jordan and your team is to package and repurpose that information for the various ways in which we can get it out there. So for me to do the best job, I'm saying back to you, a primary objective is to inform. Remember we looked at the IAP 2 last week, and we heard the primary objective right now is to start getting the word out. And I believe that's what you all said. And so I reflected and said back to Jordan, we need to get the information clarified into easy to understand language that we can repurpose for multiple ways. We can use it many ways. So I didn't go to design, I didn't propose, here's a Facebook post or anything, because what happens, unfortunately, is we get so far down in the weeds that it's too hard for us to get anything done. So I'm asking if we can stay at this level, and then the work that follows is to repackage the message for various audiences. Some venues, let's say you have a community meeting, if we ever can. Let's say you have a Facebook Live. Let's say you have a virtual Zoom meeting with staff. How are we going to explain the project to them? That's what I'm trying to get at. How are we going to explain what's happening to them? So let's play out the scenario. We have a Zoom meeting with staff to get specific input on your plans. Well, for people to be able to give you specific feedback, they need to have information. And so we would go to this information and say, here's what's happening, here's why we're here, here are some of the photographs, I love that idea, here's the problem, here's why we're investigating a one-building campus, and now let's dialogue about X. Does that make sense? Am I making sense in how I plan to use this with, or propose to use this with you? So it can go in various different ways. I don't think we have to go through wordsmithing tonight. I think, like, I have a very good idea, someone pull it on the table, and I apologize, I don't have everybody's, how who gave me the idea for that?
That was Barb.
Okay, so I have a very good idea to go back and get a final copy of that facility study and pull out the photos from there and ask Jim for those. And are there other ideas based upon this?
Well, I think what you said was, so if a resident says to me, well, why does Black Earth, what repairs need to be done on Black Earth? Well, in that study we had, you can say, okay, well, these are the top 10 things that are wrong with Black Earth, and these are the approximate costs it's going to cost to fix them. Now, if you want a more detailed list, we can provide that to you also, but we're giving you the top 10 right now. Is that sufficient, or would you like an extended list? We can provide that to you as well. And then you'd have the same thing for Black Earth and the same thing for the middle school.
Black Earth. Right, so what I'm suggesting is the work that needs to be done right now is to clarify all those messages and get them in one place that everybody can go to. And we're not going to get an exact agreement on every single word. I would love that, but I've never had that happen. But that's the direction that I'm proposing. I have work to do. It's a lot of work to get this written and clarified, and it will take some time to make sure that it's completely accurate and all of the key messaging is pulled together. But the direction I'm working on is getting together the foundation. You wouldn't build a new wing onto your high school, middle school without spending a lot of time on the design process and what you wanted to achieve. And that's true for communication work as well. We need to spend some time together, Jordan and I and his team, building that message so that it sustains you through your whole project. So my purpose tonight is to share with you my logic, to share with you a very first draft and collect your feedback. But what I'm asking you, you don't know me yet, so it'll be hard for you to trust me until you see the final projects, but is if we can get agreement that this is a good direction, then I can get to work. because I know last week we were talking about right away starting with FAQs on Facebook, and I know that will come, but I can't endorse that until we have a solid message agreed to by the group. And I'm trying to get that message pulled together. So that's why more than you expected, perhaps.
I have a couple items that maybe to add into it. Not sure if it would fit under why is a one campus district being considered or the community survey section, but maybe talking a little bit about our future search and talking about, the top items that were really discussed there and wanting the one campus through that future search, kind of, that's really where it came out of as well. I thought that would be a really good thing to add in here. And then also in the one campus district, maybe talking a bit about the teacher utilization and, they don't have to drive across the schools. They, we can even pull in some of that special ed information of having the full resources right on campus so they can go from classroom to classroom versus one town to the next. There's a couple things that I thought would be added.
Wonderful, thank you.
I think the paragraph under the community survey, I'm hesitant about having that much verbiage because I really don't want it to come across that this was the board's idea and, oh, look, we're 6% over a majority, so the board's going ahead with, with this idea, and it's because of all this good stuff that can come from a one-side campus. Like, I'm just hesitant to make it in any way seem like this is the board's decision and what we wanted, and I think the survey results people can read, and I think it doesn't have to be something very wordy and just to say, hey, listen, we surveyed the community, it looks like the majority of people decided that this may be an avenue to pursue, so the board is doing that. If you'd like to read the results, here they are. But to say, hey, look, a majority of people decided this, and further, this is why it's a good idea. That's obviously a promotion, which I know we're all in agreement that we are promoting this as a good idea, but I'm also hesitant to make it come off as the board's agenda from the beginning to get it a one-site campus.
And I think adding in the future search information in there might help to soften that it's not just a board want.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I'm just not sure it needs to be its own category. I think that's really something that can be done at the beginning and just say, hey, here's a message from the board. We were so happy with the community engagement from the future search. We know the facility category was, of mention, and because of some, updates and needs at the buildings, we've pursued the facilities, and here we are. Thank you for all the survey results, and here they are if you want to take a look. And in light of a majority of people thinking it's a good idea to pursue looking into the one district, we're working with these companies and we're going forward with some investigation, and we look forward to your participation in the future. Like, I think a lot of what we have here can be summed up really short in a way like we're just creating dialogue with the community, and a lot of the stuff and a lot of the things that people are going to want to read are the information that we have from the facility study. Why do we need the new buildings? That's the stuff that people want to read. It's not so much why each decision was done by the board and why, they can read the survey results, and I don't know. I just think the why and how we brought us here can be summarized pretty short. Do you get where I'm coming from?
Yeah, we were just saying that, this is very much a rough draft, and Jordan and I will be talking.
She's looking for inputs, and
I know,
feel
no, I
like
get it.
that's what I thought, we could collaborate and kind of
You get it?
put it into our words.
Hey, here's a question that comes out of listening. And it's an important question, and we might need to contemplate future search prioritized facilities? I don't have an answer to my own question right now, and maybe it's a little rhetorical as I think about it, but I'm thinking about it. I think what I'm hearing from Barb's comments and perhaps the comment about the future search, it feels as if you want to position this facility study as part of planning for a, I don't want to use the word successful, but sort of moving the district forward. I don't have the words at the tip of my tongue, I apologize, but that is a kind of a new illumination for me. And I appreciate that input and insight. So I'm writing that down. How we position your facilities work within your continuous improvement work, I guess, is what I'm thinking about. I don't want to camouflage it. I'm an authentic communicator. And I want to talk a little bit about the stiff and rigid tone. That's a valid point. I tend to write stiff and rigid whenever I'm writing about facilities or board decisions, because people very easily misinterpret the written word or even the spoken word, and this can become a political hot potato. So I'm super cautious about words. It doesn't mean I can't loosen it up a little, but you'll find that I'm very cautious about word choice when we're dealing with these kinds of issues that are, can become very political and people can become very judgmental. So you'll probably have to just tell me when I'm being too rigid, because I will tend to be that way on these topics. It's not a feature story in my mind, right? I'm not writing for a short story. I'm writing about a very factual process. So if we want to loosen up the tone, that's great. But my question in my mind right now, and I'm going to contemplate that, is how do we position this in your continuous improvement efforts? Because that takes a whole different tone.
Doreen, and I do think, for what it's worth, I do think that's a critical piece. If we are definitely getting to a very, in my view, a very finite level of communication philosophy at this point, and I will say that the notion of that consideration, that this is a piece of the bigger picture. It's not just about facilities. This is about the sustenance of the district.
Yeah.
And this conversation has been going on since before any of the board members were even on the board. It ran into roadblocks once upon a time. It was kind of rejuvenated to a certain extent when we did the future search, because we ended up with 10 key takeaways, and I believe number 4 of the 10 was the consideration of a single site campus. We did the facility study. We did a second facility study. And yes, all of these planning things are kind of validating the continuation of further work. So I think how that gets woven in, we're not going to come to that conclusion tonight, but I do think that's a piece. And then I think just from hearing and observing what I've observed for the last 40 minutes, for us to kind of keep the process moving without bogging down too much, is you've taken some feedback tonight, you've received some feedback, some additions, some potential adjustments to language. I guess 2 things that I would like on behalf of the board and the district is, if kind of with those things taken into consideration, if you got something back to us, we then take that through with each other electronically and do some wordsmithing on our own. And then I guess the other piece that I am interested in, and maybe this is just because I do have a tendency to go gung-ho on things a little bit, in the agenda where where we had the 4 points in there, those were kind of the things that I heard came out of our meeting that we had a week ago. As I understand it right now, this piece would kind of be the precursor to things like FAQs, to things like perhaps videos and other communication.
Yeah, this has to come first.
So if that's the case, then in terms of a timeline and just kind of a schematic, if you will, on how do we see this progressing? Because I can just tell you, when we did our operational referendum, we did all of that communication internally, but that was really, I think, at least for me, is what made that work and make it pretty successful, was we basically laid that out, and the progression, the story built on the story, starting from first to last. And I know I'm talking to an expert in the field, but I think for us, if we're going to work, with you on this, that's something that just, perhaps selfishly, but I get the sense for the group as a whole, is something that in conjunction with some updates to this, if we could kind of just see that schematic in terms of here's what I think the progression looks like, because for us that worked in the past, and I feel like we're all kind of looking for that right now. And I don't want to put words in everyone's mouth, but I do see some head nods in this room.
Okay.
And I'm seeing no anger, so I'll take that as they're okay.
I hope there's no anger. Oh, goodness, okay.
So I don't know what's reasonable for you, if we could say, midweek you get something back to me, and then I get that back to the board for a little deeper investigation.
Yeah, there's a pattern to how we roll out information for a referendum, and there's, right now you don't have a referendum. You have until August. So there's what happens before August, and then there's what happens August to November. And what happens August to November is boots on the ground. Everything has to be ready to roll so that that information campaign happens those last 8 weeks pretty heavily. So what we're doing now is very foundational, gathering as many facts as we can and crafting the story, to use that word, and then rolling it out. But right now you don't have a referendum. And I think that's important for people to sort of grapple with. So we have a little more, let's say, leniency now as to how we tell the story. The district can't advocate after you vote, and if, let's say you vote to have a proposal on the November ballot, the story that we can tell then, using district funds, has to be very factual, no advocacy. But what you can do now is build the case.
And if I made it sound like I did not understand that, then I misspoke, because I fully understand that that's where we're at right now.
So those are two different really things. So I will send you a timeline, a very broad timeline on how that'll play out, and you can give me feedback on that.
Sounds good. Was there anything else that you wanted to mention just relative to this document right now?
No, I think I got some really great feedback. I thank you for that.
Perfect, then.
Any questions for me other than that, Jordan?
I don't think so. I'll just wait to kind of get an updated draft of this, and then that sketch that talks about kind of the information piece and where we're at right now. And as I said, we'll then go back and forth kind of internally and go from there. Perfect. I appreciate it, Doreen. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
I think she brought up really good points. I think she's a referendum specialist, and so at this point, I think we have stuff to communicate that doesn't have anything to do with that. And Gary and Cindy, can you hear me?
No, they said you gotta talk louder.
Yeah, it's very quiet.
Okay, red flag for me, and the caution is that you have somebody externally, for one, trying to speak on behalf of us, which is the one aspect, and two, like she said, we have a story to tell, but she doesn't really know our story. And so that's why I think we need to put in some time really deciding what this initial communication is with community members, because I think the story is a lot bigger than, correct, this referendum path that she's taking us on. The story is much bigger, and it stems back from the future search and all the engagement we had with the community. And thank you, Jordan, for bringing up that last tidbit, is we are not foreign to this process. We are not foreign to the steps of engagement and communication with the public. And I think it just grows bigger than the performance services, study and staff and plans and all that. And we need to really take a step back. And the other point, I guess, to my rigid stiffness is, I like to think of us, we are all a part of the community. I'm not any bigger than anybody else. I'm just the mom that got voted in, on behalf of the community. And so I think that initial dialogue can just be like, hey, here's the group of people representing you, and hey, this is the story, starting back from the future search, and here are the tidbits, and here, is some of the hardships the kids are going through because the buildings are falling apart, and we try to do our due diligence and dig into that a little bit, and we surveyed you because your input is important, and here are the results. Take a look at those, and just know we're still investigating and trying to do our due diligence to make the right decision, to put forth to the public eventually, if that, makes sense. But I don't know what anybody else thinks on that, but my caution is with her diving in that we're missing really some of the emotional kind of opportunity that we can really engage with people on this.
Well, I think she's giving us an idea for what the format will look like, but we, of course, need to give our personal touch to it.
Well, but it's different with her formulating it and then saying, hey, versus us doing something and her giving input.
I guess I kind of appreciate having a template though.
Totally,
I don't want to have to invent the whole thing, so I appreciate that.
Well, and I would say that she really came today with a start of the information. And, I think her thought process was, okay, let's start to gather all of this information. She came to us tonight saying, okay, help me fill in what is the rest of your story. I think that's what she was looking for tonight. I think that it was a place to start. And so now having this person help us, we need to, it is somebody that's outside. She's not from the community, but I think that's where having her insight though in the market of having, she's done this before, having that person as our expert will help us, and then, set that groundwork, and then that will be our job to then fill in the rest of those gaps. But yeah, I think really tonight her thing was just, get the information out there. Where do we start?
But I think we spent 50 minutes on that, and like last week it was the same sort of thing. We were supposed to have a workshop where we are doing a lot of the discussion and talking about the main points that we would like to talk to the community about. We didn't get there, so I guess for all of our sake, we just need to have a better understanding of what she needs, what we can provide, so the talking points that we can narrow down for her instead of this, I don't know.
Well, it's all good information, though. I know we've been talking for the last 50 minutes, but it's all good information. And so it's all going to be useful. Just give her a chance to process it a little bit, talk to Jordan, and then we'll see what she gives back to us.
James, I think that's what I was trying to say is give it a chance, because she is working through this process and she is our expert that we are relying on. And,
but we're the experts.
We have to start somewhere.
We'll be able to put our touch on it. We're not, I don't think,
totally agree with
I don't think that they're gonna send anything out and then we're gonna be like, whoa, hang on, we didn't get to give that a final look.
Right.
No, I know, I
We'll be
just,
the ones putting it out.
right,
Yeah.
and that's why I wanna make sure we have our touch on it. And I don't want it to be, she emails, everybody thinks something, but then nothing gets done, so then Jordan has to end up doing a lot, or, you know, I mean, we have to understand our part in this too, if we are relying on her somewhat, that we do need to do our part, otherwise, she's speaking on behalf of us, which is the only caution in that, making sure we participate in that, whatever gets put out.
Well, I'll agree with that, because passivity is not the road we want to hoe on this one.
No.
Because this will be something that people will definitely take a very vested interest in. And if the response is, well, I didn't really agree with that, or I didn't even really know about that, that'll be the kiss of death.
Yeah.
So when you do get things, I will echo that sentiment, that kind of engaging in it, and perhaps I was a little bit sarcastic about policy before. In this case, sarcasm aside, this is definitely something that you're going to want to be well versed in, because people will care and they will ask questions.
Yeah.
And we don't want to fracture ourselves from the inside by just a lack of awareness or apathy.
And I think even under the survey paragraph, great, it's 5 sentences, but what were the 5 things that were chosen to be said? It was, great, you know, we're doing a one site because of this. That can be easily read into, why did you choose those 5 sentences to tell me what happened in the survey? You know, so I just am hesitant on letting people pull what they want from our investigation. And that's merely what we've been doing. We've been trying to do our due diligence and gather all the information and survey and get input and making sure we're engaged, and then let them pull from that instead of us telling them why they should think something or why they should, you know, buy into something. That, the information should speak for itself on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just, to that end, I agree with the point on definitely having your stamp on it and it being things that you want to articulate. For me, the fact that we first talked to her a week ago and it feels like everything's happening at once right now, whether it's this or just life in general, the process and trying to trust it a little bit, even though, as I said, I probably am about as gung-ho as anybody on some things, especially when I get excited about it. I want to do it yesterday. Is I'm trying to remind myself that the first time we talked to this woman was a week ago. And you know what I mean? That's just one piece for me that I don't want to lose, at least personally, even though I agree completely with the concept that this shouldn't be us being told what we need to communicate. This should be us infusing what we want communicated by them, because we're the customer, so to speak. So no, I totally appreciate that. I'm trying to be reasonable about the timeline and the expectations despite my excitement.
I think she's probably understandably being tentative with her language too, because she's operating in an environment where she's probably never had to run a referendum or help advise a referendum, going into like a pandemic sort of mindset of uncertainty. And so she seemed tentative, you know, I think with her language, and then not knowing our district, like the specifics of it, you know, necessarily. I think she just, I think she probably just feels tentative about like the verbiage and stuff you're using.
No, I totally agree.
Because I mean, she's an expert, but she's probably never done a referendum in a similar circumstance.
I would say so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unless she was alive in, 1919?
Right. So.
Which maybe is what makes me a little uneasy.
No,
you know, it's like,
I felt a lot of the same
I
stuff
totally-
that I think you were
Yeah.
expressing.
yeah, uncharted waters for everybody. But when you're not absolutely in control of everything, there's just that little, you're right, trust the process. I said that a lot, but.
But, yeah, I get it, it's hard, because it's hard for me too.
Yeah, especially when I read, I think of the way we've communicated, and it's usually you starting off in a very dialogue, conversational manner of, hey, you know, vanguards, hey, community members, it's Jordan, and it's this very just easy dialogue. And so to me, when I just read that, I'm like, that's not us. Just say, the school board has a, it's like, that's not us. And so I just want to make sure it's us, because again, if they're putting it out there saying, the school board, this is written by the school board, I'm going to make it feel like I can stand by it, and when somebody asks me about it, I'm like, oh, yeah, we had some external person, right? Like, I just want to feel good about it.
Gary?
Hey, let me just gonna chime in, I haven't said a lot tonight, I'm kind of a quiet listener tonight, but Barb, I agree with you, but I agree with Cindy as well, you both have good points. I think the process is gonna play out. I think if there's one thing we all need to realize, this is going to be a process. And during these difficult times, this is more of a process than what we normally would be engaging in. There's no doubt about it. I look at Doreen at this point as simply being a tool in our tool belt, and we're in control of the tool. From my perspective, if she's done this for, like she said, 30 years, to me, and this is just me now, there ought to be some kind of a boilerplate or a template that we're working from. And if she's laying out the foundation, by just throwing some things together tonight, I think that's a great starting point. But again, I think we need to utilize her as a tool, and we need to control the tool. Obviously, this is a first start, and it's certainly not the end at all. We're just kicking the tires now a little bit, and we need to put some meat on the bones, if you will, or fill in the blanks. And I think that's our job as a board, representing our community and the people who live in our community. So again, this is just a process. I think we need to let it play out. I'm a little bit, from my perspective, a little bit taken aback after almost 3 hours in discussion with her. Only in that, again, I believe in the chew on it method. You provide deep, information, you provide concepts, you provide templates. Let's chew on that. What is it that you want from us to put together this story? And so I'm looking forward to, again, Jordan and maybe the administrative staff getting together and putting some meat in the bones, some things for us as a board to chew on and to provide some information on how we go forward with this whole thing. But it's going to be a process. I think we all need to understand that. Over and out.
So I guess based on the collective feedback, which is good, and I'm glad we're able to discuss things in this fashion, I believe I left her with the expectation that she'll kind of take our feedback from tonight, get an updated draft back to us. I also believe I asked for at least a rough kind of sketch or scheme in terms of what this may look like in terms of progression of communication. If I was presumptuous in talking referendum, I apologize. That was not my, I didn't mean to create confusion there, because I think at this point I'm about as cautious as anybody given the times that we're all living in. But yeah, so I kind of feel like I expect those two things in the next couple days, and then I will share that back out with the team for an additional look over, and then any and all feedback that you have, so we make sure that as this is created and put together, that we all feel comfortable with the content. So that's what I wrote down in my to-do list, is to expect to have feedback back from her in the next day or two, and if I don't, then I will connect back with her and get that.
Can I just ask a question? So she works for Performance Services?
Correct.
And so I guess I'm surprised by the fact that even she's like, oh, I haven't seen any of those pictures from Jim, I'll have to do it.
So
It's
she
like-
doesn't just work for them though. So
Okay.
she is like a consultant, so she works with a number of districts and not all of them are.
So she's an independent
Exactly.
consultant that they then bring
Yeah.
in, okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I can tell you, this may be worth nothing. But I get a sense for how this feels right now. When Lisa Boyson, who's our financial consultant on borrowing from Baird, who zoomed in a month ago, when Lisa had heard that Doreen was going to be working with us, her reaction was very positive. And she said, I've worked with Doreen on a number of projects, and she does a good job. That's just one person, but Lisa's also been around for 30 years and has been a part of a ton of referendums. So I guess that is what is leaving me optimistic that we're going to work through these initial kinks and this will start to feel better.
I don't doubt that.
'Cause it's been awkward for me
It's
too.
just, it's like another variable where you're like, she obviously doesn't know what performance services does, she doesn't know us, we have, you know, so it's just one more variable that is messing with the streamline, you know, ness of it all. So it's not necessarily negativity, but it's just, right, making sure we have all our ducks in a row because it is a little messy.
Jordan, can you send us this, I can't access her link here, is that something you can send us later? Not right now, but
Yep,
just later, so I can look at the whole thing.
I can.
Thank you.
Anything else on the topic for now?
Have you had Zoom meetings with her
Yeah,
on top of all your other?
I had
Yeah.
an hour Zoom meeting with her before.
Yeah. And I think that's just my one part too, is everybody's time is valuable. So let's make sure that when we are talking, everybody has a clear indication of direction, what we need to chew on. Thank you, Gary, chewing is good. What can we chew on? Go ahead and chew.
I love chewing, Barb.
Chewer too. Let's chew at it.
So tobacco-free campus, I'll remind both of you, there's no chewing around here.
All right, does anybody have anything else for the public relations part of the meeting? All right, hearing none, we will move on to 6.1, which is set committee and board meeting dates as needed / future meeting dates. Does anybody have anything to add or they want to talk about?
No, but I mean, it is a valid point, is when are we gonna, how and when are we gonna have these type of discussions or input or, and I think that's what kind of, the timeline is free, we have time, but it's, we don't meet every other day, we don't have, you know, a bunch of discussion in between these, so pretty soon another two weeks goes by, oh, it's almost June, and we have another meeting with Doreen, but time goes, you know.
So we have been lucky in the fact that we haven't really had to have an executive session. And so let's just wait for her to come back and talk to Jordan. And if at some point we feel like, hey, we really need to pull everybody together or have a meeting where we just kind of talk about this stuff, we always reserve the right to do that. Okay, I just want to make sure you guys are all on board with that though, because I always value everyone's time and I don't want to just call a meeting just because I think it's a good idea. But I think in this case, if we are feeling a little uneasy about things, then that's certainly something we can do.
I mean, I would feel comfortable in her giving us the timelines, the info, whatever she needs to give us, and then us utilizing the time in executive to discuss and hash away at it and send back to her, because as awkward as these Zoom meetings are, I think as far as chewing on things and getting stuff accomplished, that method of her giving us stuff, us looking at it, giving it back is more beneficial than.
So we'll be in touch, and if we get to that point, then yeah, we can always have a meeting and we'll make sure. I am certainly not going to feel comfortable sending out any information unless all of you agree with what everything says and you are in support of all the information, because it will do none of us any good to send something out and then have one person or two people that either don't know the information or don't agree with it, and then that's just, it's not gonna be a way to make it work, so.
I can say with 3 board meetings in a row, the hamster wheel has been spinning pretty quick in terms of trying to get ready for board meetings, so just in light of, we have 1 week in between, we will have plenty to keep us busy, and we can correspond back and forth and do some refinement leading up to that next meeting.
All right, well, if no one has any other future meetings or anything that they want to talk about, then we're on to item number 7, adjournment.
So moved.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh,
I was on mute. I didn't get in there. Are we gonna meet on Tuesday then, or on Monday? Just wanted to verify.
We're still on for Tuesday, right?
Right now, Cindy, we still have it on for Tuesday, even though I don't know that any of us maybe have any grand plans. The forecast looks better now, though, so who knows, maybe someone will be out on the water somewhere enjoying the day.
We'll be back, so.
Totally fine with that. I just wanted to clarify, because I know I had mentioned it before. So thank you. That's all. Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay, you guys are all on board with it being on Tuesday then?
Either one is fine.
Okay.
So
We'll
we have,
just keep it as regular.
so we had Mike, did we have a motion?
Yeah,
Mike.
we do have.
Mike Ford.
Mike and Matt.
Mike and
Yeah.
Ed, I'm sorry.
Okay, any other discussion? I guess not.
Yeah.
All right, Mike,
Yes.
Barb,
Yes.
Cindy,
Yes.
Gary,
Yes.
Mary Beth,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. Thank you guys all for your time tonight.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Hold up, I gotta turn off the other camera.